Hello everyone, welcome to Ku'gath Plaguefather of Nurgle Second Impressions Guide. So I did a few turns to check out how the faction plays and draw my own conclusions on it. I'll go through the most meaningful aspects and in the end provide you with some army compositions you may wish to try for your own campaigns. As always, this is not an in-depth guide, but it will certainly help you out. And without further ado, let's play with Ku'gath Plaguefather. For our short victory condition, we'll be required to destroy the factions of Clan Helheim, look at it here, pretty close, let's say. Karakazul, which is slightly farther away. It starts being a little bit farther away, it's still close, but yeah. And then the Caravan of Blue Roses, nothing closer than you could have. So we also need to maintain control of the initial province, that's not a big deal. To occupy, loot, raise or sack 35 different settlements. Again, pretty straightforward. So the reward is quite standard. Important for a demonic faction. Winds of Magic is always nice. So this ensures that all your armies do have a little bit of power reserve. Now the long victory, then we start talking. So we have to achieve the short victory, of course. Occupy, loot, raise or sack 80 different settlements. And then destroy the Oracles of Tzeentch. Look at it, so far away. And the Flaming Scribes. So needless to say that should you complete the short victory condition, you should aim going southwards. I'll explain why that is an issue with this gentleman. So maybe the best way is just go through the sea, destroy that faction, and then proceed somewhere else. I'll explain why in a moment. Should we achieve this, we get plus 10 Lord Recruit rank, decent reward just to continue into domination, of course, or any other conclusion. So Ku'gath is defeated Brewmaster. He enjoys with plus 10 growth, simple, plain, plus 10 growth, less recruitment cost for Nurglings, and more recruitment health for when Nurglings are recruited. This ensures that your Nurglings are pretty much always in the top health condition. In terms of climates, now that is where I want to talk a little bit, because mountain and desert are in the unpleasant and uninhabitable. So as we always know, there are some benefits and some consequences for that. So please disregard that I got a screenshot from an uninhabitable climate, frozen. Of course, it's desert for them, basically. And the mountain and the pleasant. So this is the key issue. Even though everything seems to be green, yellow, pretty good for a domination, it's not that cool nearby. So nearby you have some green, and then you have lots of mountains, and if you proceed with the most straightforward path to go into the south to complete the long victory, you have the desert, and also the mountains. So, even though with any other starting location, like if you start here, it would be great, because by the time that you reach these regions, then you would already be overwhelming, so that's cool. But in this specific situation, I believe the climate is kind of good average, let's say good average. It's still a good faction to dominate the map. Just try to go through the sea to control the southern ways, maybe go upwards here. Not ignoring the desert, of course, but just build up a little bit more before you go into it. That's the idea, at least. So your starting province is a 4-settlement province. Pretty good. But you start on a minor settlement, actually. Now, do note that you do have a nice, unique building that gives some income. This is really necessary for you. And some good bonuses overall. Control, growth is always nice. Now, it is really the best to defend, though. The nearby sea stops most of the AI, and you can always see it. You also have access to any goodies that you can find on the sea, which is excellent. Extra money always helps. But be careful, of course, about attacks from the sea. Keep an eye on it. Typical expansion will be to go towards, conquering the initial province, and then go against Horst here, Helman Gorst, like I call him, and then dominate a little bit of this area, try to achieve the short victory, of course. And then, of course, like I stated, you can go down and try to pursue the southern Chaos Wastes for the long victory, or you could just try to dominate a generalized area, and then once you're big enough, you can go anywhere you wish. It's pretty good as replay value. You can take different approaches, of course. Now, a note on this one, of course, Dreadrock, it's a nice capital city. As soon as you can, you should conquer it. And we'll speak more about, you know, the necessary buildings that you may have in just a while. Like most demonic factions, everyone hates you. You can get some Skaven, maybe some ogres to like you if you swing their favor, though. You'll have to fight versus vampire counts, versus over there, versus the high elves, dwarves, some ogres if you don't manage early on to gain their favor. So dwarves, of course. So, yeah, you're gonna have a lot of trouble. And then Tzeentch in the end if you choose to pursue the long victory as well. So, let's talk about outposts. So if you get anyone with missiles or good anti-large units, which you lack, then that would be great. So for example, if you get... So basically for outposts, some anti-large cavalry, which you lack from the ogres, some anti-large infantry as well, some missile troops, which is always helpful. And kind of the same from the Skaven, if you can get Skaven. Typically it's one of the factions that's more neutral, they can bounce to whatever. So missile troops, of course, and some artillery or some anti-large units, as you see there. So let's talk mechanics. The cyclical buildings are an interesting mechanic. They're constantly upgrading, so you build the first one, takes 4 turns, and then it cycles, next 4 turns it cycles to this level, then to this level, and you can see the income is increasing. That's both a good thing and a bad thing, because once it reaches here, it will go down. 500 income to 50. This is why people have so many issues with the income. Well, this and other things, but it adds to it. Now, basically, this is what goes into the mechanics of the case. I'll speak more about the specific buildings in that section later on. In terms of infections, these are gathered by buildings advancing captives from the battlefield, looting, sacking, and raising settlements, etc. And then what you have is the plague cauldron here. You can summon a plague cultist, okay, or you can infect an army, and that infects both settlements, both armies. It has different effects on one or another. And then you have the base plagues here: the pox, the bubbos, the ague, the rot, and the palsy. And then a lot of symptoms that go with them. So a lot of different combinations for your fun. It's good to use this, of course, to ensure that your enemies are always slightly weaker when you're fighting them. You do have some decent recipes here that can be unlocked. This has additional effects, which is also awesome. So feel free to concoct your own plagues here. Now, in terms of your units, they actually recruit instantly. I can show you this in just a moment. I believe I don't have anything. I was just recruiting. Yeah, I was just recruiting just now. So, and I don't have enough funds. That would be the issue. Okay, so I was just recruiting. There you go. So we can recruit some units here, and you'll see that they start up half size, but you get them immediately. And of course, if you recruit 2 of them, you can merge them. So it kind of it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. You can create a literal 20 stack in one turn, provided as you have the income, of course, and the money for that. Now, in terms of the unholy manifestations, you do have a pestilent growth. This depends on how how much corruption is overall in the world. Of course, after a certain point, you'll always be where you need it. Okay. Now, pestilent growth, it gives you casualty replenishment rate plus 20%. This is awesome for a just newly recruited army. You've just recruited it, and then suddenly it grows up really fast, and it gets to full health immediately. You know. Then you have the plague spreading capabilities. Okay. Always note that your campaign movement is disabled. Then you have the exponential growth, which gives you 200 growth, as if you need so much. And then recruitment cost minus 20%. It's crazy good. And then you have the every settlement with a plague. So a random plague will be given to every settlement and army in the province upon completion. This sounds amazing, although this is quite costly. It's perfect to start a war in a 4 settlement provinces of an enemy, though, of course. Now, cults are all the last one. I don't have one because they spawn randomly. And of course, what it means is that on that specific settlement, you'll be able to build a cult, different buildings, and act upon those effects. One of the mechanics I wish would change slightly, but it's still, you know, a decent thing to use for Nurgle, of course. So let's start with army stances here. The typical ones, actually. So channeling for Winds of Magic, campaign movement range penalty of 10%. Then we have encamp, 50% campaign movement cost there, movement range penalty basically. And then immune to attrition, of course, enables replenishment. Then we have the raiding. Basically, it's all the same as the very standard ones. Campaign movement range for Ambage, 25%. So the only thing that I dislike is that there's nothing here that includes like something spreading plagues, you know, more often, or, you know, better chance or something like that, which would be nice. But okay, I guess they can always add that later on sort of changes to it. Now let's go into the commandments, the province edicts here. So cycle time -1 for infrastructure buildings. This is really cool. It's really important. It helps a lot. Now we also have control, recruitment cost reduction, not a lot, and campaign movement range against enemies. So very jack of all trades stuff. We also have a chance of a plague spreading and plague duration for armies in the province. Now this is quite different for Nurgle, because typically these can be negligible, but for Nurgle they're quite effective. So if you want to spread out those plagues and to increase the plague duration on your armies, by all means that's someone to use. And then we have a Nurgle corruption in adjacent provinces and Nurgle corruption on your own. Pretty much no growth, no income, which is kind of an amazing thing for Nurgle, but still something we can work on. Okay, probably the most used will be the cycle time here, maybe the chance of plague, some corruption of course is always necessary, of course. So let's talk about buildings. Basically they do have an interesting idea. Growth in income is actually awesome in some points and awful in others. I'll explain. So your buildings will cycle. Okay, and for instance, from income generated 50 to income generated 300. That sounds excellent, but then it goes back. So at some point you'll be rich and suddenly you're broke, and you didn't realize that this was what was happening in the background. You know, too much of the cycle went to the first. So careful planning may be in order. Like, you should have always like some buildings on the first cycle, some buildings on the last one, to ensure a good steady income. That is difficult to do, not impossible, but of course, you know, it will be something to balance out during the game. Now the infrastructure is growth in income. Then we have some income and control here. We have some income, casualty replenishment rate, and corruption. And we have a little bit of everything. Income, leadership when under siege, attrition when under siege, or less attrition when under siege, less enemy hero action. But the most important one is the cycle time, reduced by 2 for basic military buildings. Now, this is an excellent one actually to have. So of course, to ensure that it gets cycling much faster. Now note that those cycle as well, so be wary of it. So there's only 5 military buildings, which is excellent. I always like when it's reduced, and 3 of them can be built in minor settlements. Come on, you can get Chaos Warriors of Nurgle with great weapons in minor settlements, and soul grinders in minor settlements? Really? You can get pox riders? Let me just double check. Yeah, you can. You can get those. So yeah, that's one of the great things about the Nurgle building system. You can get to those even in minor settlements. Now basically one more notion is where the heroes are. So you can recruit an exalted hero Nurgle here on the main building right there, and then the plague ridden, which also replenishes troops. More on that later, but you can also recruit them on the 3rd level there. Can you do that on the... No, you get the cultists of Nurgle on the minor settlements. Yeah, that's the idea. That's the idea. So research. Let's speak about research. It's rather lengthy. You can see that it has 7 of these. Okay, most of them, it gives you better plagues. You know, it gives you some good advantages against some units, some good buffs for your units as well, decent ones, but it involves everything with the mechanics. Gives you growth, gives you cycling mechanics, gives you gives you a lot of stuff that you really will enjoy during the game, of course. But it is rather costly, so try to build up slower, see which ones you really want, and that's about it. As always, we have our Lord-specific skills, casting or melee skills here. The red line skills are for your army, and your blue line or campaign skills. Let's start with the blue line. It's slightly off in the first part. It has, income from looting settlements, recruitment costs here, income from raiding and from second settlements, the corruption, maybe nice, but nothing too out of the ordinary. Of course, if you're planning to sack and raid a lot, by all means take that. If you plan to loot, take this one, of course. So the last part, it does have the upkeep, and it does have the replenishment, not only the replenishment rate, the casualty replenishment, but the growth also, which is excellent. You always have a lot of growth, like I said. Now, the only issue is that this is different from other blue lines. So I'll show you I'll show you already, actually. I do have a Chaos Sorcerer Lord that I hired here, and you can see it's slightly different here. It has the recruitment cost and the raiding and sacking, but then it has ruination. Okay, and then it doesn't have. It has casualty replenishment rate and attrition. Okay, and then it has some ambush defense gems. There's no upkeep reduction. See? So slight differences that you may have to double check for yours. So in terms of the red line, it's rather average. There's some good compositions without spending too much that can be found. But there are differences between the heralds and the sorcerer lords and the red line skills. I'll show you those later on. Now, heroes are available in the main buildings, as you've seen before. And Plague Ridden actually provides replenishment. Cultists provide mobility, and of course they have other summoning spells, for instance. So it's up to you, of course, but it has some good choices, and I kind of like it. The Exalted Hero also helps, having a strong melee character there. It's really cool. Now, in essence, that is it in terms of the recruits level. Oh, let me show you here. Yeah. So note that they have some changes here. The Chaos Sorcerer Lords, for instance, they do buff Forsaken, Chaos Spawn, Chaos Fermenticles, in case you want to use those later on, of course. So in here we have the red line skills for the heralds. Note how most buffs are towards more armor, more melee defense. Your units will become really tough, really difficult to destroy. The difference is rather in the flying units, actually, the melee attack and weapon strength. So those will be the more focused on the attack, basically. Now, comparing those with the Chaos Sorcerer Lords, and there's still somewhat of focus on armor, but it's slightly more balanced, I believe, because it does have some, some more weapon strength generally, some melee attack overall in all of these. So I do find that probably the Chaos Sorcerer Lord will have a little bit more focus on attacking, and maybe the heralds more on the typical playthrough of a Nurgle army. Just survive forever. The choice is truly yours, of course. Just don't forget that the Chaos Sorcerer Lords also buffs up the Forsaken, for instance, if you wish to use that in the Chaos Spawn. Now, Ku'gath gives a lot of advantages for his Nurglings, so it makes just some conclusion that you should use some Nurglings with him. They'll become average to even top tier infantry later on for sure, especially with defeated Brewmaster right there. Now, he also provides some good advantages for Great Unclean Ones, that's why I included them. Notes the cost in terms of redline skills, not too many. For a caster melee lord mix, I wouldn't really like to invest too much, over 15 for instance, of course, but that's up to you, you may wish that. Now, in terms of the heralds, something more thematic perhaps with Plague Bearers, some Forsaken there, some Plague Toads here, or some heavy cavalry going, heavy flyers over there. You can see the same cost, 15. It's average. It's basically more than that. You're pushing a little bit too much. And finally, Chaos Sorcerer Lords. Well, I'd like to typically go with them for some chosen elites right there, some chaos knights, or again, you can also use the flying units if you prefer. So quite a wonderful faction to play as. Like every faction, the difficulty lies in the beginning. So dealing with the initial provinces, dealing with Gorst early on, that should be the focus. And after that, you're kind of quite good to go. You would have your solid foothold to expand. Now, income may be an issue, even as you see here, basically. And the buildings are expensive. However, raiding, sacking, the sea around with some goodies, those are all tools that you should use for the income that you need. Now, growth is crazy good, especially with everything that can give you growth everywhere. So you'll probably grow faster than any of the other faction in the game, and you totally should go for it. For the army, they have great infantry, good cavalry, poor missile choices, good single entities, good flying units, but they do lack good anti-large units, and they're very slow overall. Now, replenishment is excellent, one of the best factions for it. Now, this should really be the focus. No matter your losses, you just continue to build up and grow and fight. Get some income, some money right there to just build up more forces if you need it in a rush. And yeah, that should give you the heads up. So I believe now it's the time to play with Ku'gath Plaguefather.